Can you hear me okay as well?
Yeah, you're a little bit faint, but I've got you.
Is it
I can
loud?
hear you basically.
Can you? Is it louder if I go like this?
It is, yeah, yeah. But that
So,
doesn't seem like a comfortable position
no,
for an
it's
hour.
not.
So,
I'll try and put it.
um,
I'll try and do it like this. Just say if I'm speaking too quietly, just let us know. Ready? Cool. Liam, first of all, can you just give us a bit of an introduction to yourself? Let us know who
yeah,
you are, where you're from, what you do, if that's okay.
yeah, of course.
That's cool.
My name's Liam Bateman. I'm currently the CTO and co-founder of a digital agency in Manchester called Silverchip. I've been in and around the digital world as a developer, freelancer, contractor, through to the CTO role that I sort of take on today for just over 15 years. And my relationship with North Coders, I've been I've been sort of privy to sort of seeing the North Coders journey from the start. We've been super fortunate to hire, I think, 5 or 6 North Coders over the last few years. And yeah, that's me.
There's so many things that I want to talk to you about, from the school meal finder app that you've made, to your career and where you started from and how you put an agency together as well. How did you become the CTO of Silverchip? What's your journey? What did you do when you were younger?
Well, we probably need to go back to start there. I think from when I was young, I was quite lucky. My parents got a desktop computer, and I think from that moment onwards, I knew that I was always going to be involved in the software development world. I never set out to build an agency when I was young. I just knew I wanted to be a computer programmer, and I studied all the correct courses at GCSE, studied the correct courses at A level, but A level became a challenge for me because it was so academic, and I didn't have the academic brain. It was too slow. There wasn't enough happening. So I actually dropped out of college.
No way.
And actually, I went and got a graduate software development job at an insurance company. So I was writing the algorithms for insurance quotes. So when you go on to get car insurance, I was writing the rules on what would determine what your price would be.
No way. How did you go from school to developing algorithms for calculating quotes? That's a bit of a jump.
Again, there was a lot of persistence there, if I'm honest. So I just started reaching out I knew that I could do the programming. I didn't have any qualifications because I sort of flunked it. So I just started to reach out to businesses that were recruiting for university graduates. Was the most common thing at the time. Mm-hmm. And I think I annoyed this hiring manager so much that he basically said, "Listen, jump on the phone and let's have a chat." And sort of thankfully they saw some potential, and I got the job there.
So you got into this insurance company. You're building algorithms of your own accord. Were you part of a dev team or?
Yeah, I was part of a great dev team, quite a big dev team at the time. So this business had grown really quick, and they're still around now, and they do incredible stuff in the industry. But at the time, there was the front and back end teams, and I was part of the what they consider to be the front end team. And they used a proprietary language they built themselves. So they built their own programming language to build their software solutions. And it was built on, do you remember the old, I don't know if you remember, but the old way of programming was punch cards. So you take a punch card and you sort of have a grid pattern.
This is well before this is like Bill Gates was using punch cards. That's old.
Exactly. Well before my time as well. Yeah. But this modern variation of it was to take that physical punch card and make that. So you'd write the code that would look like a punch card, and that would result in the output basically. Probably immensely complex for the time, but a really successful company, and they developed a great product on the back of it. So yeah, quite interesting stuff.
Who developed the programming language?
The one of the original developers that worked there, one guy as well. He was fully responsible. Wow. He was an older guy as well, and I think he was getting to retirement age, and he was fully responsible for the development of this programming language.
So after the insurance company, what did you move on to?
So I went to, again, I moved, spent about a year there, and then moved to a small in-house team, which sort of gave me a bit more flexibility. But the same challenges for me were that things didn't move fast enough. So in the big company, they had about 200 employees at the time, and you were just sort of a small part of that, and nothing moved fast enough. I wanted things to happen the next hour, not the next day or the next week. I was very impatient, probably still am really. And when I joined this smaller team, I did have more impact. I could sort of make changes quicker and sort of get moving. But ultimately, I was missing that control and that element of speed. So if I had an idea, my concept was just let's run with it right now and get it built and see what the impact is. So I spent about a year at the next company before I got a random request to build a product for someone.
Yeah.
And it was basically Moonpig before Moonpig was a thing. So sort of making stationery online, but bespoke stationery.
Yeah.
So this gentleman got in touch and asked me to build it. So I said yes, no problem. He offered me an amount of money that equated to a month's pay, and at the time a month's pay was so far away that so I quit my job basically with this month's pay, and built this product in 2 weeks. And I later found out that this was his hit and hope in many ways, because they'd been to another agency, a sort of large company at the time, who'd failed to build this product for them and said it wasn't possible, which he didn't tell me. But I delivered that product, and I still actually work with that gentleman today. I'm really good friends with him now, and that was 13, 14 years ago.
So you built that completely on your own.
Yeah,
and this was
that was the first freelance job.
And this was how long after going into the industry and being employed?
Around 2 years.
So how confident were you as a software developer at that time?
Confident, maybe naive was probably the better word to use. Everything was kind of very. I could write the code. I could figure that out. That wasn't a problem. But there was a lot of naivety in the way that I wrote the code and kind of what I did. But that was almost like a power at the time. It's a powerful thing, because that blind naiveness allows you to push and sort of get things done that if I would have considered that and look back now, I'd be like, if anyone said to me about to do that now, I'd be like, that's not
really.
Not a good idea.
So it gave you that fearlessness to sort of make decisions that you wouldn't normally make.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, that's ultimately that's when Silverchip was born, and that became the vehicle for my contracting and freelancing over the next few years from there.
How long were you freelancing for then? So that was your first project which you won. How long were you freelancing before you were like, okay, let's do a real agency?
I freelanced and contracted for about 18 months, 2 years, where I was working on solo projects with small teams, but then also working at some of the big agencies in Manchester. So the really kind of the powerhouses of the industry at the time, working on the big commercial brands. So I'd go in there and work for 6 weeks to 6 months in some cases.
How would you get in through the doors? How were you winning business? And you'd have been quite young then, surely, as well.
So again, it was. I was 20. Would have been about 21, 22. Yeah. And it was just referrals. So it was people that I'd met. I'd got quite lucky with a few contacts that were already freelance, and then they sort of said, "Listen, we need some help. Can you come and help us?" But it was just my network. And admittedly, I got lucky with some of the great contacts that I'd picked up, but it was down to referrals and people that I knew.
Were you aware of the importance of networking? Because I've noticed from working in the industry for a bit now that there is not every software developer is really good with people, and that is a really important skill for progressing in this sort of industry. But it's not something that everyone has from the get-go. Is that something that you were aware of whilst you were doing your own freelance stuff? I need to network. Or was it just natural to you because that's just who you are as a person?
No, it wasn't absolutely not natural, and I'll kind of explain why that is the case in a second. But in terms of the networking, no, I had no idea that I was even networking. I was just talking to people that were interested in what I was interested in, or it was never kind of something that was conscious. It was just something that happened and evolved.
Organic. So no business development, just purely organic conversations because you were just interested in it.
That
is so cool.
So I do look back on that phase and think there was a lot of luck involved, without a doubt. I was in the right place at the right time, but the industry itself was so different back then. People didn't program. That was a rare skill still. So, it's still a rare skill now. We know what the demand is for software developers, but if you go back 10, 12 years, the demand was even higher. So if you could code, if you could write good code, then you were in demand. And it was a very small network of people that did that freelance world.
So then 2 years, that's just you on your own networking. You're getting yourself in the industry, quite established with some of the powerhouses you mentioned. What was the next stage for you there? How did you progress from there?
So my universal problem was that my confidence was so low in terms of speaking to people, which is quite funny you mention it, because my networking all came from people in the industry. So I could talk to a developer, no problem.
Yeah.
But my confidence in terms of talking to somebody that was running a business or in the commercial sense I didn't believe it was good enough. So I had a school friend I went to school with one of my best friends now, and his younger brother was well into digital marketing and technology, but sort of had what I called at the time the gift of the gab. He basically talked to anybody at any time and sort of chewed their ear off. So I remember mentioning something randomly, said, "Listen, this is what's happening. I think there's a business opportunity." And that's where we started. That was Jamie, who's the co-founder of Silverchip today.
So he brought the business development side of things, and you were the tech.
That's it. Yeah. So when we sort of spent a good few months sort of putting the plan together, and then we got an office in an old mill in Reddish in Stockport, and he spent his time liaising with clients, sort of building up the specifications, working on that process-driven stuff, and I built the systems.
What were you thinking about when you were coming up with that plan? Because it's scary starting a business, full stop. I think it's scarier to start a business with someone else as well, because you've got, although you get validation from working with the other person, there's more risk, there's more to think about. So what were you thinking about when you're putting that plan together, and how were you planning on going out to market? Because you are making it out of nothing. It's a weird thought. Although it's obvious, but it's still weird just going out to someone with the product or being like, we can make this for you. So how did you come through?
Well, a couple of questions there, I suppose. The first one being about it being scary. For me, I was stuck in the freelance and contract world at the time, where every time that I was working all week, all weekend, in the evenings. There was not a time that I wasn't working, because I had this passion for what I was doing, that if someone said, "Listen, can you fit this in?" my answer was generally yes, which I started to see wasn't going to be sustainable. So I was working 7 days a week constantly, especially for that last year. But the other thing as well is that every time that I said that I was going to, set this up as a business and potentially look at taking on staff in the future, a new freelance opportunity would come along and it would take away. So then you'd be looking at, well, do I get paid, or do I keep going here? So for me, the business partner decision, as well as the skills and that he brought to the table, was more a accountability point of view for me to go, right, well, if we're going for this, then we're going to be committed to this one area, because I can't let that person down.
Yeah.
So that worked exceptionally well in terms of the partnership. You're absolutely right, though. There isn't a lot of partnerships in business that work. They tend to hit a point where they fall down, or they have different life ambitions, or whatever it might be. I mean, we're nearly 11 years into this now, and we've always had a really good way of communicating. And absolutely, there's probably times when we've wanted to sort of tear each other's heads off, but it's always in a way of logic always prevails, is our phrase. So even if we might be a bit emotional one day in terms of debating something, logic will always prevail, because we're both very logical people.
Yeah.
And we both have our own roles to fulfill, and they're very different. So for me, the business partner decision was definitely the right one, and one of the best decisions.
Cool. Well, blatantly. Are you still mates now? After enough.
We're pretty much still mates most of the time. No, we are, absolutely.
Do you ever look back at the way in which I remember the first, so I tried, I must have been 16, 17. I tried building a website for, my sister worked at a cafe and they wanted a website building. I was an absolute dosser at that age. Not interested in computers, but a bit naughty. And I didn't know what I was doing. I could design things. And I knew a bit of HTML, but I wanted something that was really quick for them. So I remember building a Wix website for them, which was just so, when I look back at that now, I just think, I can't believe I built a Wix website and sold it to them. Very cheap, but still I made them pay for that. Do you ever look back? I'm assuming you'd have done it at a considerably higher level because you were into programming at that age. But did you ever look back then and go from now and think, wow, I can't believe those products worked, or were you confident in them all?
Kind of probably the opposite, if I'm honest. Some of the early stuff that we built, we put so much time and so much kind of energy into that. You know, as a business, they were a poor decision because, you know, the money that was coming in just about covered the money that we needed to pay the bills. But we were so focused on, we were so sort of into and kind of driven by creating these awesome solutions that we probably went a bit too far. Yeah. And there was a point about a year in where we sort of realized that, you know, if we don't get serious about the finances and the revenue, then this thing might not be here. So there is a fine line tread, but certainly in the early days, we was, you know, the products I look back on now were way ahead of the time, really. You know, we were building full 100% custom e-commerce sites with, you know, everything that kind of the off-the-shelf stuff had and more, but from scratch for clients, which is a bit kind of naive in terms of in a business sense. But the end product was so good and so specific to that client that they were in love with it. It generated them a lot of revenue. So I look back quite fondly on the stuff we did back then.
What made you choose to build from scratch? Because a lot of businesses in those days who were providing those sort of services were actually selling off the shelf solutions. So what made you want to go, aside from the fact that you obviously seem to like to have control over things because you know that you can do it in that way, what made you take, because it's a lot, it surely extends the time, which extends potentially the resources that you have to input into building it. So what made you choose to do that? Is it because you felt like those solutions would have a better impact, or did you just want to do it yourselves to learn?
a bit of both, really. I think that there was a control element to know that we could deliver exactly what we said we could deliver. There was also at the time, the off-the-shelf stuff was quite loose. So there was not a lot in the .NET space. So there was quite a lot of open source PHP stuff. Mm-hmm. But .NET was still very much a corporate entity that hadn't really opened up yet. So there wasn't really a huge amount. There was Umbraco. But in terms of the e-commerce world, not a lot there. So we loved working with .NET. We were quite happy with that. So that's where our experience was. Mm-hmm. So that was probably a big part of the decision. But the main thing really was that we set out from day one to say that we were always going to build what we were asked to build, not tell people how something should work. Yeah. So when we went to see like an e-commerce company, we'd ask them, what is their optimum way of doing deliveries? And the answer we'd get would be different at every single company. Yeah. But we knew that we could build and optimize what they've currently got, rather than say to them, well, actually, you need to use a weight system, or you need to use a loss leader system, or whatever it is. We could build exactly what they wanted. And that became really important. It became sort of one of our foundations, really.
What, completely tailored solutions?
Completely tailored, yeah.
If it was, I just keep putting myself in your shoes. If I was starting out in this company, it was just you and him for how long was it just you and him?
About a year.
So I'm assuming you'd have been trying to get bigger and bigger clients, which would mean harder projects and surely stuff out of your, stuff that you don't know. So how would you deal with that amount of pressure? Because someone else is relying on you to do well as well if they're not coding. How did you deal with having to meet all of those needs?
Well, at that time in our lives, like we were early 20s. We had no families, no commitments in that sense. The only pressure came from what we set the pressure to be. So if I look at the whole, that first year of business in many ways was probably the least pressurized time in my entire life. The freelance period before it was a lot of pressure. And obviously as we've got bigger, there's a pressure to kind of keep mortgages paid basically for everyone that works for us. Yeah. But in that first year, if something needed doing, we would stay until whatever time to make sure that it got done. And, whether it's, I know it's not a badge of honor, and I understand that it's not a healthy, sustainable thing. But at the time, if we needed to do something, we would be there until the early hours in the morning because we were so driven to deliver that we had to do that. But also, it wasn't work to us. We'd go to work to sit with your best mate to write code. Like that was what we loved to do at the time, and we'd have a good time doing it. So. Again, in terms of pressure, that first year was brilliant. Really, there wasn't any pressure in them first 2 years. Sort of just as we extended the team, we did become like it was a small group of friends that we'd play Call of Duty for 2 hours at lunchtime, and we played all the online varying games because we were just a group of people that loved writing code, playing games, and then we just order a pizza. So people wouldn't stay because they needed to. They'd stay because they wanted to be around, basically. So especially the first 2 team members that we had, it was just like a group of mates really spending the weekend together.
Obviously, you reached a point where you were like, I can't do this all on my own. I'm going to need to bring other people so we can start meeting this demand. What was it like to bring on? Because surely then you'd have had to start considering practices for managing a team. And I'm assuming you wouldn't have had experience of managing a team from what you've done so far. So how did you make that transition?
The first person we took on, we failed miserably. We failed miserably for him, but also we should have known from day one that he was never going to be the right person for what we were looking for. And we learned a lot of lessons he was only there for about 4 months, and we learned a hell of a lot in that first 4 months. So when we actually backed off then. We weren't going to hire again until we had this figured out. And there's a young lad that wouldn't stop ringing us. So I think it was every Wednesday and Friday at the same time, 4:30, the phone would ring and it'd be his mobile number over and over again. And we dodged it for as long as we could because he was just asking, have you got any jobs yet? Have you got any jobs yet? Can I come work for you? And eventually we were quite busy and we said, listen, we've seen this apprenticeship thing. What about if we get you on an apprenticeship course, come work for us and we'll see how it goes. And that was Jake, who's now part of our management team, is our technical lead. But yeah, so he was the first one. And again, we'd learned a lot from the first hire that went wrong. And Jake was easy in some senses because he was like us in the sense that he was passionate about the programming. He was so driven to learn. I mean, the fact he wouldn't stop ringing us, that he fitted in really quickly, and he got up to speed really quickly as well. Cool. So it wasn't until about 5 or 6 when it was a case of right, okay, all of that stuff that sort of startup mentality of 4 mates coding and eating pizza and drinking beer, that has to go. And that's when we started to bring in the sort of the practices that we needed.
So what would you say is different now? Because you're well established, you've had some pretty big clients. So what's the difference to Silverchip now in comparison to what it was like after the first 2 years when you had your first 2 people on board? How are you structured now? Because you must have learned so much in your times of being freelance and then through working and building this business. What have you learned that you apply now to your company to make sure that it runs?
There's so much. As an individual, as a human, I'm in a totally different place in my life than sort of 21-year-old Liam that just wanted to get a paycheck and play Call of Duty at lunchtime. And the ambitions of where we are now, the foundations still remain. One thing that we said from day one, and we tell this to all the people we interview, is that mine and Jamie's job is to build a workplace that we want to come and work in. Now, as selfish as that sounds, that's, we see it as we are and we're developers. So we understand what environment that we wanted to work in. And if we can create that now, then we can get the best developers to come kind of work for us. So the only thing that's really different is that we have access to more resources. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain, we know when to apply the off switch. So where previously we might have sort of, it would have been normal that we would have pulled an all-nighter. We fully understand now as grown-ups that is not a sustainable outcome for anybody. And if anything, that's completely discouraged now. So there's a lot of experience-based learning that we've picked up on over that time. And I think that's the most important. But at its core, we're still trying to generate a place where it feels like you come into work, your friends are there, it's relaxed, but driven in terms of chasing some kind of excellence, some goal, but not a corporate red tape, spinning wheel of money that just needs to generate revenue to pay the bills.
So how are you managing projects that you're winning at the moment? So are you still involved as a CTO? Are you still involved in those meetings with clients? What's your role now as a CTO? And once you've won those projects, what's your process?
So my role now is very hands-off. And while I think I've considered my role to be CTO for the last, or technical director as it was, for the last, or since the business started, in reality, the CTO role has only really existed in Silverchip for the last about 2.5, 3 years, because that's the point where I don't believe that a good CTO should be programming, because a good CTO should see the overall destination of the business, see what's happening, and help direct the technical side of it to suit that. So my role these days is basically to look after the development team, to make sure that we're progressing in the right direction, to make sure they've got what they need, to make sure they're learning about the mistakes that we're making, that we're sort of checking when things go right, when things go wrong, and just to overall lead the technical direction of the business. So that involves lots of meeting our clients, lots of conversations, externally, internally. And I do the occasional bit of programming, but more as a hobby, or to make sure that I understand what's happening in the industry, so I don't get totally disconnected.
So did you still learn? Can you still do it? Have you still got it?
I think I've still got it. I can still program. I can still build stuff. I'm sure I'm not as sharp as I used to be, and I'm certainly not the best programmer in the world. But I can definitely still do it.
How many people have you got working for Silverchip right now? How big is your
company? There's 15 of us at the moment.
15, cool. So are you all, how do you deal with one project at a time? Or I'm surely that doesn't make sense. Surely you've got a few on.
No.
Yeah.
No. We might only ever be working on one or two large projects at a time. So a project life cycle for us is tends to be anywhere between 2 and 6 months for the main bulk of the project. But we don't just do project work. We only really do account work. So we might work with that client in a 80% of our resource might be on that client for that 4 months. But come the end of that, we're still going to be working with them on updates, fixes, refinements for many years, basically. And most of the clients we've got today, we've had for in excess of 3 years.
That's really clever. I feel like that's the best way to sort of do agency work, having that relationship where you're always a go-to. Yeah. That's clever.
Yeah, I think as well, it's super naive for anyone to believe that project work now exists in today's world, because I think again, going back 10 years, you could build a website, you could put it up and you could call it a day. But now things are changing so quickly. Technology is changing. People's way of consuming technology is changing. We've just, the new iPhone came out, obviously it's coming out now, kind of depending on which model you want. And that's going to present new opportunities. So if we built a product 6 months ago, a year ago, there's a chance that product could take advantage of them new opportunities. And we need to be on top of that to speak to our clients, customers, to say, listen, we could now add this feature, or we could do this. So things move so fast at the moment that it has to be that way.
You mentioned that you work with React for front end and then .NET on back end. What's the reasons for choosing, aside from the fact that they're popular? Are you sound like you're just stuck on those two. Why is that?
So we've always been considered ourselves to be a .NET house. .NET house was the old phrase of how you referred to it, but we always did .NET. We did the classic .NET stack, and then as time's gone on, we've seen that there's React sort of emerged and has remained quite stable, and it offered us a way of building a product that we believe to be much better. So when we brought React in, the last thing we wanted to do was change everything. Mm-hmm. So we just by just switching the front end to React and shifting the back enders to just a slight different variation of the .NET stack meant that we could keep the skills that we had and not make a huge shift. Yeah. And continue with the experience that we had. The reason that we use them two and primary them two is because ultimately tech's just a tool, and you can do anything in any tech stack. There's always an edge case where there's certain tech stacks that will be better performant for certain things, but they're really rare conditions. Mm-hmm. So we do other bits and pieces. We do the occasional bit of Node and Python, depending on what the requirements are. But again, if we can get exceptionally skilled, get our experiences in on them two tech stacks, that's where we should focus. If we were to get a new client and go, cool, we're going to do this in, I don't know, Ruby, then the end product would not be as good as what we would deliver in the stack that we know, because we've got 10 years plus experience in delivering .NET products.
Let's talk more about the school meals finder, because that is a sick app. Basically, it's done so well. Can you tell us a bit about it first, and then tell us how it's done? Because there's quite a few businesses on there.
Yeah, of course. So obviously, the school meal finder, Marcus Rashford kind of inspired a sort of nation to help feed children that don't have access to food over the half term due to the government's cancellation of the school meals. We were in the office on the Friday before half term. We'd had a meeting with one of our advisors, and then somebody mentioned about what was happening, and we could see all these tweets coming on Marcus Rashford's page. We could see all the Facebook posts popping up around people that were offering school meals, but it was just immediately evident that they were getting lost in the ether of the internet, because a Facebook post from a local chippy is not going to be seen by more than 60 people at most, and it's not going to get in front of the people it actually needs to. So it was kind of suggested that someone just said, listen, what if there was a directory for all of this? And I think it was about half an hour later, we said, well, let's build one. Let's do it. Let's build one tonight.
In half an hour? Hold on. You went from, so what, were you all talking about it together? Or
it was kind of mentioned in passing, and then Jamie basically rang me and just said, listen, what are you doing tonight? Let's build this. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'll put my daughter to bed and let's get cracking. So that quickly, yeah. And that was kind of a spark of that original sort of core sort of identity that we had back in the early days of, see something, make it happen and do it. And then sure enough, yeah, we got stuck in it about 7 o'clock and started coding.
Who worked on the project? Was it just you, or?
No, there was basically me and Jamie sort of drove it, but there was 3 or 4 developers that dipped in over the night. Our project manager got involved in terms of gathering data, as did our account director. Because obviously building the platform was one thing, but then we needed to put all the data in that was popping up everywhere and keep that up to date. Yeah. So yeah, it was a real team effort.
So can Jamie code as well then?
So yeah, so when Jamie first joined, he joined to sort of be the to talk to the clients and things like that. However, in that downtime, I started to teach him the fundamentals of like the front end, and he sort of ran away with that and sort of became a really, 2-3 years later, was a really competent front end developer. So that's where his specialism ended up being.
So you taught him as well?
Well, I taught him the fundamentals. The rest of it was self-taught by him.
So you and Jamie built on it, and you had 3 of your dev team jump in just last minute. Did you just go to them and say, look, we've had this idea to build a free schools app. Can you help us? You all jumped in.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. We have a Teams account. We have a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
We stuck it in there. Admittedly, it was late on a Friday. Some had plans. It was close to the end of, just before lockdown. The ones that didn't jumped on straight away. The ones that did have plans were back on the Saturday. So, everybody did get involved when they could, that's the kind of organization that we've always wanted to be part of. And that for me, as much as the School Meal Finder did so well, for me, the best bit of it was how many people got involved and how easy it was for them to get involved.
So how long did it take for you to build it? And then was anybody getting in touch with people? I mean, how did you release it after building it? So you built it. What were you just?
So yeah, we built it Friday night. I think it was about 1:30, 2 a.m. on the Saturday morning. So just for the Friday night, whichever way you look at it. I just put up a little video on LinkedIn, which I'm absolutely shattered trying to talk to the camera. Then we'd loaded in, I think it was about 300 organizations at this point.
How?
This is what our project manager, this is what Jamie and our account director was gathering all this data from Twitter feeds, from Facebook posts, putting it into an Excel spreadsheet, getting all the information we needed, so that when the system was ready, I did a big import of the
all
data.
In the night. How did you allocate so firstly, you'd have had to come, did you sit down and come up with the tech behind it? No? Or were we just let's just do it?
It was very much a solution-driven approach. So it was very much like, right, okay, we knew what it needed to do. It needs to be a postcode search of organizations that are going to help people with school meals. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the tech, it was a case of, right, what's the quickest way of us getting this up and running? So we grabbed Bootstrap, we grabbed the .NET project, and yeah, it just organically grew from there. And the joy of the team and the way they're split is that they've all got their own specialities. So, Jake jumped on and was a case of, right, well, he's our DevOps guy. So he's like very much, right, cool, I'll sort the AWS out. Jamie ended up building most of the front end because he was like, right, well, I'm here, so let's do it. He's not coded probably for 3 years, but he built all the front end. I naturally fell into the back end. Our account managers and account director were like, listen, we can get the data, we can start the Excel spreadsheet. So organically, it kind of grew as a team, and we all knew what we were trying to achieve. So yeah, it worked really well.
You went out, you did a LinkedIn post. The LinkedIn post, did that go viral? Because I remember seeing it. But
not really. So one of the issues I think that LinkedIn has is that it's not really real time. Yeah. So a LinkedIn post that you put up today, I still get comments on that original post today. Oh. So you put it up and it might be 2 or 3 days before people see it. So it did get some traction. But one thing that was really helpful was that both mine and Jamie's partners basically started to jump on the socials and kind of look after our social accounts. So we were reaching out to everyone from managing directors of big business, tech businesses in Manchester, to the press sort of outlets, just to try and get them to sort of pick this up, because we knew as soon as it landed in one of the mainstream online publications, that was it. That's all it needed. That from there it would have been fine. So they really helped with that side of it.
Cool. And then, so how many businesses did you have on it in the end? And do you know how many free school meals you gave out?
We don't know how many free school meals we gave out because we don't track the communication from that point. Yeah. I do have the number, which has slipped my mind from, which I'll just grab now for how many organisations we had visit. I think we're up to 50 or 60,000 searches.
Wow. Over what period of time? Is this over
the 5 days? So we ran from pretty much from the. We launched on the Saturday morning, so it would be 7 days, including that weekend. and then on the Friday we took the final results, which was the end of half term. So it was wildly more successful than we anticipated. We knew that it'd have an impact, but as I think I was saying to you originally, that the tech itself was so straightforward, so simple. It just shows that the power that tech can have in terms of gluing together all of that good stuff that's happening in that space. So all them organizations, they did all the hard work, and this tiny tool in many senses that took no more than a couple of days to build just glued the audience to the organizations, which is the power of tech. Absolutely.
That leads us nicely on to the next point of that I want to talk about is how do you think, as software teams who maybe listen to this, how we can react to things like issues like this in the future? I remember I was saying to you last time we spoke that we should have an A team for problems like this, where we can just all jump in and find solutions. Because you could do, I mean, if you think about it, with coronavirus, I know there will have been teams of devs jumping together and being like, what solutions could we come up with to help this? But how do you think we can make sure that in the future we can be more reactive in the same way you have? Has this had an impact on you that makes you want to be in the lead of that? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say that when the coronavirus situation hit, and it was very clear to us that once the initial sort of wave of panic had finished, it was really clear that in-house development teams were being made redundant left, right, and center. So, e-commerce and stores and stuff like that had development teams in-house, they were being made redundant, and it was all, the job market was kind of all over the place during that period. And at the time we said, right, well, we've got all of these people with skills and people like us that were doing okay at the time, and if anything, we need to recruit. So how do we link them two things together? And we made the fatal mistake of overanalyzing the problem. So we got in touch with GMCA to see if they'd back this solution, and then before you know it, you're a week into the problem and you haven't actually done anything. So by the time we'd hit that point, it was a case of, I think we're too late now anyway. I don't think we can help, because there were certain things popping up, and there was recruitment companies that were doing some really good stuff. So the biggest tip really for me is, like, you just got to move. So you've got to, like I said earlier, in tech now, it's such a complicated world to build a product, because we make it complicated, because we put all of these systems in place which are brilliant, and they're saving us many, time and time again. But when it comes to getting a product built quickly, you've got to sort of forget about all of that. Forget about your specifications, your Jira management tools and all that kind of thing. Get a whiteboard, write down what it is you're going to do, go build that feature, go to the next feature, build that, and then get it up and released. And I think that's the bit that we were missing in the initial instance, which we weren't missing on we got right on the School Meal Finder, was that we saw the problem. We worked out it wasn't the worst. The worst case was we were going to lose a night of our time, but we'd have a good time doing it, because we were back to the old days of writing code at midnight. So that move fast is really, really important.
That's. I mean, it correlates with what a lot of successful people in this industry have said. Move fast and break stuff.
And we as an agency, I think all businesses that grow will go through that phase. But we started off with that kind of move fast and break stuff, and then we broke something we shouldn't have broken, and we were like, whoa, we can't do that again. So let's put this gateway check in, and then all of a sudden you're slowing down the development. Every time you put something new in, you're slowing it down, and they're all valid things. But you have to weigh up the fact that the more oversight you put into that organization, the slower it will move. And that might be perfectly fine, but you have to understand that's a consequence of that action.
As CTO, I'm assuming it's up to you to try and make sure that things aren't going too slow. You try and look at things from that wider level. How do you stop that? How do you catch that?
It's a juggling act on a sense of, you have to balance the risk with the reward. And ultimately, we're working on a working on a financial product at the moment for an online bank. Yeah. So there's with that product, for example, there's a massive amount more auditing and checking that we need to do to make sure that doesn't move fast and break anything. So the risk on that one is much larger. However, if we look at something like the school meal finder, the reality is the product didn't exist. So if we moved fast and took it down for 10 minutes in the early days, then that wouldn't have been a problem. So, you've got to balance whether, which is the most important. Is it to make sure the product is 100% stable and risk-free? Or is it the fact that you want to get features out really quickly and get them to your user base?
We're running out of time, but do you think this is something that's so dependent on who you are as a person, do you not think? Because I know I've tried starting like companies since I was like 8-9 years old, just weird random ideas. And I know as I've gotten older and I've learned more about what could go wrong, especially with projects where I'm not really sure about them, there's so much hesitance behind making it perfect. And you're right, it absolutely kills you. But do you think that's a personality trait? Or do you find yourself telling yourself, I don't care about this, go ahead, smash it?
No, I don't know if it's a personality trait or it's something that you just learned. So I've been in all of them positions. So I've been in the position where, we've built internal projects and I've said that can't go out anywhere because it's not ready. It's not ready. And the reality might be that it's something really insignificant in the grand scheme, but I'm so focused on making it perfect. Yeah. And then the experience that we've had is that product's never shipped. It's never gone anywhere. So I look back objectively and go, well, hang on, we put 2 months of development into that project and we've left it there because I didn't sign it off because I was looking for that perfect solution. Mm-hmm. So I think that experience of having seen that side of it, that scares me enough now to say, actually get it out the door. And then equally, the business partner thing that we talked about before works really well. So I'm not a detail person. So when it comes to, it's interesting, when I'm writing code, I'm in detail mode, but when I'm looking at a project, I'm like, brilliant. Does it fulfill what we're trying to do? Does it go from A to B? Ship it, let's go. Whereas Jamie's much more detail and process driven. So we're both on opposite ends of the spectrum in that sense. So we tend to meet in the middle, which then gives us the correct solution, which is that hybrid. So it works so well in that sense.
You're so lucky to find that in another person that you've made such a big commitment to balance it out. Yeah. It's weird how you sort of really need this balance, because I think one thing I've learned, especially from business, is there is normally someone who is the chaos, but the leader in thought and ideas, and then someone else who's the details and bringing it all together.
And what's nice about us is that role literally can shift. So there's certain occasions where like Jamie will have absolutely, there'll be crazy ideas and I'll be like, whoa, hang on a sec, how are we going to technically do that? Like, how will this work? How will that work? And then literally the week after it'll be the other way around and he'll be thinking, well, how will that process here and stuff? So that as a relationship works really well, but I do understand how rare that seems to be.
You're lucky it's paying off and you're doing great things. Like I said, I've got that friend who I think I've just been in touch with. She said she did 10 meals in the first week, 15 meals in the second week. Wow. And I can't remember, she said 30, but I don't know if that was on Facebook or through the app, I can't remember. But that's pretty decent.
It's staggering.
Exactly.
We know it shouldn't be happening, but these organisations are the ones that have made the real difference.
But you tied the dots. This is the thing. You sat down and you tied the dots. Without that, it would have been more chaos. But you made it. You contributed in such an insane way and so quickly. I think that's awesome. But are you going to keep your eyes open for more projects like that in the future?
Absolutely. It did exactly what we talked about today. Is that it reminded me and Jamie of kind of why we started and kind of when we started, and also to see the response from the team. Like, we work on some incredible products, and sometimes they're behind the scenes. Sometimes they're internal systems that we don't see the impact of, other than it's just numbers on numbers and outcomes. Whereas for this, it was such a big outcome for everyone, not only from the individual. I posted one of the individual stories on LinkedIn, and the individual stories of people that were genuinely looking for help was that, one of them was enough. Like that's all we needed to sort of get this done. And that just motivates you to build more. So yeah, it was a win-win all around, I think.
Pure, so pure. It's good. We need more like that in this world. We need. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? What sort of tips and pieces of advice have you got for? Because there's two ways about it. A, you're a software developer that's gone on to start your own company and do well, and then secondly, you've got experience in how to put an agency of people together to find solutions for problems. So what advice have you got other than move fast and think in that sort of way? What other tidbits have you got?
Best example? So move fast is probably the big one. The second is it is all about the people. That's the cliche, but it's so true, especially in the service-based sector that we are. If you've got dead weight in your organization, if you've got people that aren't bought into your vision, then they shouldn't be there. As simple as that. So get the right people, and you've got to enjoy it. If you have set up if you set up a business to in the classic form to make money, then you will most likely fail, because 5, 6, 7 years from now, when it's when you're grinding it out or you're having a bad week, bad month, it's not going to, the passion is not going to be there to pick you up. So you've got to have that passion and drive to enjoy what you do.
No way. Cool. Liam, thank you so much for coming. That's so insightful.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's all right.
I feel like I've just waffled for an hour, so hopefully it was useful.
No, that was all useful. I was so interested. There's a big part of me that always wants to go into more business stuff, and I forget that I'm a software developer because that's what I've got to ask about. But it's just so interesting where you've come. You've done really well. Well done.
Yeah, and there's so much around the developer scene, the junior developer scene, that I think that to cover as well in terms of that. But I don't know if it goes down well. We'll have to do a part 2.
Yes, I'm down for that. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Thank you again so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
No, that's really all right. Cheers, Liam. All the best, mate. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good day.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye. So he's f***ing cool.